A bullet spun through the upper atmosphere, an ancient relic of war hurled with surgical rage. It had no microchips, no plasma coating, no artificial intelligence. Just one man's breath, one pull of a trigger, and one alien throat bursting open. Before the Zarnak fleet even processed the kill, their commander lay twitching in a pool of iridescent blood. Silence followed, cosmic, terrified silence. They had laughed at Earth. But Earth had Kyle Mercer. The first time the Zarnak broadcasted to Earth, they hijacked every screen. Not just televisions and smartphones, microwaves, wristwatches, car dashboards, even children's toys lit up with the face of Vielexer, supreme warlord of the 7th Nebulae. He had a jaw like a bone saw and a grin like he'd already conquered you. His voice crackled through the airwaves in English so perfect it had a British accent, which made it sound even more condescending. "Greetings, Earthlings," he said, eyes glowing violet. "Your civilization has been deemed quaint. Your resistance would amuse us, but we're on a schedule. You have 48 hours to surrender. In return, we'll allow you to keep your atmosphere." People thought it was a prank at first. Then the skies opened, and the Zarnak warships arrived like thunderclouds forged from obsidian and neon. They didn't even attack. They just hovered. They didn't fire. They laughed. It was worse than firing. And when the President of the United States, former sitcom star and aspiring motivational speaker, authorized a missile launch to show strength, the aliens caught it midair, dissolved it with a sneeze, and sent back a video of themselves high-fiving. At the United Nations, chaos reigned. The French ambassador fainted. The Russian delegate demanded vodka. The Canadian representative tried to apologize to the aliens. Military leaders screamed over each other in 20 languages. Global news anchors asked if surrendering politely might earn Earth a gift basket. The world was unraveling. But in a bunker 5 miles beneath the Pentagon, General Whitaker, an old war dog with steel for bones and no patience for drama, sat quietly as the generals panicked. He chewed on a toothpick like it owed him money and stared at the tactical screens. Then he muttered a name, almost a curse, almost a prayer. "Mercer." Everyone went silent. Some blinked. A few looked confused. One colonel whispered, "That lunatic?" Another laughed nervously. "Didn't he get kicked out for punching a satellite?" Whitaker didn't laugh. "He's not dead. He's in Alaska." The room shifted. Alaska. Of course he'd be in Alaska. Where else would the world's most dangerous marksman, Kyle, Hawkeye, Mercer, go when the world betrayed him? The last mission he took part in, 5 years ago, ended in a cover-up and a body count nobody would confirm. They said he took out a convoy from 2 miles away in a snowstorm with a bolt-action rifle older than his grandfather. Then he vanished. Cut to Alaska. A cabin so remote the son had to make an appointment. Kyle stood shirtless, chopping wood like it owed him money. His beard was a forest. His eyes a war. The only sounds were an axe-splitting pine and a squirrel he kept arguing with over nut storage. He wasn't hiding from the aliens. He didn't even know they'd arrived. He didn't have Wi-Fi. He didn't care. That changed when a black SUV skidded into his clearing, nearly taking out the woodpile. Lex stepped out. Government liaison, early 30s, annoyingly charming. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, especially in Alaska, and especially not asking the guy who once shot her laptop during an argument to come save the world. "Kyle Mercer," she called, clutching her coat against the cold. "You're still alive. That's surprising. You're still annoying," he replied, not even looking up. "Aliens are here. Big ones. Big mouths. Disrespectful. Not my problem. They think bullets are jokes." He paused mid-swing. Looked at her. "Bullets? They laughed at our weapons, Kyle. Called them primitive propulsion tubes. They think humans are amusing. They think snipers are obsolete." He went back to chopping. "They're not wrong." Lex stepped closer. "You gonna let them be right?" Back in the cities, the aliens got cockier. They hovered over national monuments. They projected massive holograms of their leaders making fart noises over iconic speeches. One alien took over Times Square and challenged Earth's greatest warrior to a game of rock, paper, scissors, then vaporized the Statue of Liberty's torch just for laughs. In retaliation, Earth sent its best drones. The aliens hacked them mid-flight and used them to skywrite. Try harder. The world was losing its mind. TikTok was flooded with alien prank videos, most of which ended with explosions. Memes circulated comparing Earth's military to Nerf guns. Humanity's last hope wasn't a weapon. It was an attitude problem with a scope. At night, Kyle stared at an old rifle case hidden under floorboards. Inside was his M82A1, customized beyond regulation, hand-etched with kill marks he never counted. He touched it like it was a scar. On the wall behind him was a faded photo, him and his unit, before things went sideways. Before the mission that made him walk away. He poured a glass of whiskey, sat down, turned on the radio for the first time in years. Static. Then a news voice. Today's ultimatum from the alien war fleet includes a demand for the surrender of all Earth-born projectile weapons. He blinked, drained the glass, and started cleaning the rifle. The next morning, the world woke up to news it couldn't believe. Kyle Mercer was on a plane to D.C. The Pentagon put out a statement. We're not surrendering. We're recalibrating. Lex met him on the runway. You're late, she said, trying to sound annoyed. Kyle checked his watch. I'm right on time. Just waited for the wind to change. She frowned. You ever think maybe you enjoyed being a myth? He looked at the rising sun, then toward the orbiting ships. No. I enjoy ending jokes. Especially when they don't know they're the punchline. As the alien fleet watched Earth's reactions with amusement, one ship picked up something strange. A human sniper unit activating for the first time in 5 years. The Zarnak technician monitoring Earth defense chuckled and filed it under cultural relic activity. He didn't know what a .50 caliber slug could do, or that it was already on its way. Kyle stood at the edge of the hangar, watching soldiers and engineers rush back and forth like ants on caffeine. It felt wrong. Too clean. Too bright. Too loud. War used to be something you could taste, mud, blood, metal. Now it was all holograms and committee briefings. He gripped the handle of his rifle case like it might disappear if he blinked. He had flown halfway across the world to answer a call he told himself he'd never answer again. And still, something deep in his gut told him he wasn't back. Not really. Not yet. Lex, always the smartest person in the room and always knowing it, walked up beside him sipping something green and awful from a paper cup. She didn't look at him. Just leaned on the wall and waited. They both watched a general yell at a robotic dog that had wandered into the wrong tent. You smell like regret, she said deadpan. I smell like Alaska, Kyle replied. She took another sip. Same thing. A younger soldier jogged over, saluted Kyle like he was a movie character, then tripped on his own foot and nearly fell into a box of high-yield grenades. Kyle raised an eyebrow. Lex shook her head. These were the people Earth was relying on. These were the ones left. The best had either died, burned out, or sold their skills to tech companies building VR simulations of wars that never happened. They were briefed inside a decommissioned missile silo that now served as Earth's final planning room. Screens surrounded them, each showing a different angle of the alien fleet still hovering above the major cities. One ship had taken to playing Earth music, badly. A haunting, garbled remix of Beethoven's Fifth echoed through the skies of Tokyo. Kyle sat with arms crossed as generals laid out their plans. Lex sat beside him, chewing a pen she had stolen from a colonel. The plan was simple. Distract the aliens with conventional forces while a small team snuck into position for precision strikes. The goal wasn't to win, just to buy time, sow chaos, make the Zarnak question their assumptions. Kyle was assigned as lead marksman. Lex would be his handler. The room buzzed with tension. But Kyle felt none of it. He had one job. One scope. One bullet at a time. After the briefing, Lex caught up with him in the hallway. So, you're in. Fully in? Kyle looked at her. I'm not here to wave a flag. I don't care if you wave a taco. I just need to know if you're going to freeze when the aliens start monologuing again. He didn't answer. Just walked past her toward the armory. She followed. Inside the armory, Kyle was handed his gear by a technician who looked like he'd been raised by video games and fear. The rifle was clean, upgraded, and glowing faintly from some alien tech the humans had reverse-engineered. Kyle frowned. What's this? Adaptive Gyroscopic Stabilization Core, the tech said proudly. It adjusts the barrel micro-alignment in real time. Less deviation at extreme distances. Kyle nodded, then took out a screwdriver and ripped it out. I'll stabilize it with my hands. The kid looked like he just witnessed a crime. Lex laughed. He's old school, she said. Means he knows what he's doing. Later that night, Kyle sat alone in the training field. It was quiet except for the buzz of a nearby drone trying to catch a bird. The sky above was clearer than it had been in weeks. The alien ships had stopped their mockery, at least for the moment. A strange calm before whatever storm they were building up to. He lay on the ground, rifle steady, breathing slow, eyes locked on a paper target a mile away. The trigger squeezed like an afterthought. The bullet hit dead center. You're back, said a voice behind him. It was Lex, holding 2 cups of coffee. Or at least your hands are. He didn't look at her. Hands were never the problem. She sat beside him. For a moment neither spoke. Then she said softly, You know they said you froze. Back in Siberia. That you hesitated. I did. She blinked, surprised by the honesty. But you still made the shot. I didn't freeze because of fear. I froze because I knew the target was a kid. Armed, sure. Dangerous, maybe. But a kid. She looked at him carefully. And you pulled the trigger. He nodded. That's why I disappeared. Because after I pulled it, I didn't feel anything. Not guilt. Not pride. Just nothing. Lex was quiet for a while. Then, maybe you're here now to feel something again. He didn't answer. But he didn't deny it either. The next day, the Zarnak made their move. Not an attack, something worse. They abducted a United Nations ambassador mid-speech and projected his disintegration in Times Square. No explanation. Just a display. A message. Earth watched in horror as the man screamed and then evaporated into particles, his final expression frozen in panic. Kyle saw it happen from the base's briefing room. No sound, just the video. He watched every frame, like studying wind patterns. Lex turned to him. Still think it's not your problem? Kyle didn't say a word. He just got up, grabbed his rifle, and headed to the hangar. Within the hour, he had handpicked his team. 3 people. No more. People he trusted from before, or at least didn't distrust. There was Raoul, an explosives expert who once wired a wedding cake with C4 as a prank. Kira, a silent, terrifying woman who could break necks with her pinky. And of course, Lex, who insisted on going despite having 0 combat experience, but a surprisingly lethal ability with alien tech. They called it Operation Iron Silence. The plan was reckless, borderline suicidal. Get close to one of the primary Zarnak leaders. Wait for public exposure. Take the shot. Retreat before the sky lit up. As the team geared up, Kyle stood in front of them with his rifle slung across his back. He wasn't giving a speech. He wasn't a leader. But he said one thing. They don't respect our bullets. That's good. Makes it easier when they don't see the one that kills them. The transport lifted off at midnight, flying low beneath radar. Below them, Earth shimmered with lights, unaware that its survival might depend on one man with an old rifle and a twitch in his trigger finger. Above them, the Zarnak ships loomed, arrogant, complacent, ready to inherit a planet they believed couldn't fight back. But arrogance, Kyle thought, was loud. A sniper was silent. And silence kills faster than sound. The drop was rougher than expected. The alien jamming fields distorted gravity around the capital, forcing the pilot to release the team 10 miles out. The transport hovered for all of 3 seconds before it lurched sideways and vanished in a flash of defensive flares. Kyle and the others parachuted into a crumbling office block on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., landing hard among shattered desks and flickering lights. The city looked like a museum exhibit, frozen in chaos. Cars abandoned, buildings scorched from warning blasts, and skies filled with ships that moved like predators circling prey. But in the middle of that slow suffocation, Kyle could feel it: clarity. A sniper didn't need a clean world. He just needed a sight line. They regrouped fast. Kira took point, her silent steps barely audible even on broken glass. Raoul was already unpacking small drones, each loaded with explosive charges disguised as soda cans. Lex moved with urgency, tapping into hijacked alien surveillance feeds using her modified wrist device. She guided them toward the tallest remaining structure, an old radio tower overlooking the National Mall. According to intercepted transmissions, the Zarnak commander Vialexa was going to make a spectacle. They were planning a ceremonial humiliation, a public address where he'd mock humanity one final time before beginning what he called the Cascade, the sequential obliteration of Earth's capital cities every hour on the hour. Kyle didn't speak. He didn't need to. Every step he took was a countdown. Every breath a calculation. As they climbed through ruined buildings, dodged patrol drones, and slipped between Zarnak scanner beams, he wasn't thinking about victory. He was thinking about velocity, wind patterns, distance, and angle. His world shrunk to numbers and geometry. Emotion could wait. Revenge could wait. All that mattered was the shot. By the time they reached the tower, Kyle's knees ached and his hands itched for the rifle. The tower swayed slightly in the breeze, its metal supports groaning like an old man stretching after a long nap. Lex looked at it and frowned. That thing's barely standing. You really want to fire from up there? Kyle was already climbing. Wind's cleaner up top. Fewer thermal distortions. And if I miss, I want the last thing I see to be a decent view. Such a motivational speaker, Lex muttered, following him. Raoul and Kira stayed below, setting traps and preparing escape routes. They would create chaos as soon as the shot was fired. Distraction was survival. Kyle reached the top platform, dropped into prone, and set up. He didn't bother with a spotter. Lex sat a few feet behind him, quietly relaying updates. The Zarnak mothership hovered above the National Mall like a giant black sun. Its lower bay opened, revealing a descending platform lined with gold and shimmering tendrils. Vialexa stood at the center, arms spread, flanked by 2 guard beasts with heads like lava and eyes that tracked everything. His voice echoed through the city, not through speakers, but through people's minds. People of Earth, he began, practically purring. You've given us quite the show. Resistance is such a charming dance. But the curtain must fall. Kyle adjusted the scope. The wind was fickle. Vialexa's armor glowed with energy fields, standard issue command level shielding. The kind bullets bounced off like pebbles on steel. But Kyle wasn't using just any bullet. Lex had provided a single round, loaded with tech scavenged from downed alien drones. It was unstable. Illegal under every human treaty. A hybrid between Earth's raw kinetic force and alien phase disruption energy. They called it the Ghost Round. 1 shot. If it missed, there wouldn't be a second. Vialexa raised his arms again, preparing to signal the first cascade strike. A countdown started behind him, glowing symbols floating in the air. Lex whispered, 5 seconds to mark. Kyle exhaled. Everything fell away. The buzzing ships. The crackle of alien static. The pain in his shoulder. Even the guilt that clung to his bones like rust. He became the rifle. The barrel became the sky. He squeezed the trigger. The silence that followed was unnatural. Even Lex held her breath. The bullet traveled faster than sound, faster than light under certain conditions, bending slightly as the embedded tech activated. It phased once, then twice, slipping through layers of shield like smoke through cracks. Vialexa turned slightly, perhaps a sixth sense, perhaps just arrogance. It didn't matter. The round struck him just below the throat, piercing his central neural cluster and detonating in a whisper of light. He collapsed instantly. The countdown froze. His guards turned, confused. The mothership's lower base started to seal, but the panic was already spreading. On the ground, alien troops scrambled. Some screamed in their own language. Others looked up, pointing toward the tower. Lex's voice cut through Kyle's earpiece. "You got him! You got him!" Kyle didn't smile. He was already moving, packing up, sliding down the rusted tower ladder like he was born on it. Below, Raoul triggered a wave of explosions. Kira opened fire with stolen Zarnak rifles, lighting up the plaza with blue fire and shouts. Kyle and Lex regrouped with them, moving through smoke and confusion as alien soldiers fired blindly. One of the beast guards roared and lunged at them, smashing through a concrete wall like paper. Raoul tossed an explosive into its mouth and said, "Swallow this, buddy." The resulting blast painted the side of a tank with glowing alien goo. By the time they reached the exfiltration point, Zarnak forces had descended in waves, but none of them had a commander. The chain of command had cracked. The fleet above paused, uncertain. Earth hadn't just struck a blow, it had shattered an illusion. One man. One bullet. And suddenly the invincible didn't feel so invincible. As they boarded a civilian rescue chopper hidden beneath a collapsed parking garage, Lex finally laughed. "I can't believe it worked. I actually can't believe it." Kyle checked his rifle, then looked out the side of the helicopter at the burning skyline. "They believed we were primitive. Weak. Like history hadn't taught them what happens when you poke the wrong planet. They're learning now," Lex said. Far above, inside one of the command ships, a Zarnak lieutenant stood frozen before a wall of data. He replayed the footage of Lex's death over and over. No plasma. No energy blade. Just a projectile. A bullet. Somehow accelerated, somehow accurate beyond belief. He turned to his superior and whispered, "They have weapons that can kill commanders through phase fields." The superior shook his head. "No. They have something worse." "What?" "A man." And as Earth's defenders disappeared into the chaos, heading toward safety, Kyle sat back, closed his eyes, and finally allowed himself one thought. Not relief. Not pride. Just readiness. Because this wasn't the end. It was the first shot of a different kind of war. The sky turned red just before dawn. Not the kind of red that spoke of sunrise or hope. It was the sickly, artificial glow of orbiting fury. The Zarnak had stopped laughing. Their commander was dead, and they had finally understood what they had underestimated. Earth had teeth. Worse, it had a sniper with nothing left to lose. Now the retaliation began. Entire cities lost power. The moon flickered like a dying bulb. Gravity itself grew inconsistent in parts of Europe, people floating in their kitchens while toasters crashed into ceilings. The aliens had been patient. Now they were unchained. Kyle stood on the roof of a hospital in what used to be Baltimore, staring at the massive ship overhead. It looked like a cathedral fused with a battleship, drifting in silence, elegant and menacing. Behind him, Lex was working frantically on a device she'd built from scavenged alien tech and half a motorcycle engine. Raoul and Kira were coordinating with what was left of the international resistance. Command structures had collapsed. Military leaders were dead, imprisoned, or hiding. All that remained were pockets of chaos, whispers of rebellion, and the fading hope that the man who had pulled off the impossible once might do it again. But this wasn't like before. There was no planned shot. No ceremonial stage to snipe from. This was war without elegance. And the Zarnak had unleashed something worse than firepower. They had released the Queen. No one knew her real name. Earth's data streams only registered her as a ripple, a shadow inside every transmission. She didn't arrive with the others. She emerged only when it was personal. A being not made for war but for vengeance. The Alexa was her son. The death of a commander might have shaken a military. But the death of a son had awakened something far more dangerous. She descended in a ship made of silence. No engines. No lights. Just an absence of sound and a presence of fear. She hovered above the ruins of what had been the U.S. Capitol and broadcast only one message: surrender within 1 hour, or be turned into memory. Then nothing. No taunts. No laughter. Just quiet. Lex finished her device and handed it to Kyle. It'll disable their cloaking fields within a kilometer radius for 90 seconds. Maybe more if you sweet-talk it. After that, we're back to throwing rocks. Kyle took it without a word, inspecting it like he did every piece of gear, like he might need to die with it. She stepped closer. You don't have to do this alone, she said. I'm not, he replied. But I am the bullet. The plan was as reckless as it was simple. Get inside the Queen's radius, disable her cloak, and put a bullet through the brain stem of a creature whose anatomy they didn't even understand. Raoul would plant charges on the ship's underside, Kira would disable the drone's swarm defenses, and Lex would keep communications running while remotely piloting the escape vehicle. Or at least, that was the dream. Reality never cooperated. They found an old Dodge Charger in a forgotten garage, its engine barely alive, and bolted alien propulsion panels to its sides. It wasn't elegant. It barely turned. But it flew. They launched from a crater outside the city, ramping up a collapsed overpass that used to be I-95. The car screamed through the air like a missile held together with tape and sarcasm. Alien fire rained down. Raoul whooped in the back seat while Kira calmly fired out the window, taking down drones mid-flight. Kyle sat in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the Queen's ship, calm as a monk. The car crashed through an opening in the underbelly of the ship and skidded to a smoking halt. They were inside. Just like that. The Queen's lair wasn't what they expected. No control panels, no steel walls. Just an organic cathedral, alive and breathing. Pulsating walls lit by veins of energy. It felt more like being inside a heart than a ship. They moved fast. Kira split off to hack the internal defense systems. Raoul dropped explosives like breadcrumbs. Lex monitored their movement from outside, voice steady in their ears despite the chaos around her. Then the Queen appeared. She didn't walk. She hovered. Tall, impossibly elegant, her body composed of shimmering plates that moved like waves. Her face was not a face, just a mask of light and shifting emotions. And when she spoke, it wasn't words. It was a feeling. Rage given voice. Raoul didn't wait. He opened fire, knowing it wouldn't do much, but needing to distract her. Kyle sprinted down a corridor, Lex guiding him through turns, her voice calm but urgent. The device in his hand blinked. 70 seconds left. He reached the central chamber, placed it on the ground, activated it. The Queen screamed, or maybe the ship did. Either way, her cloaking tech dropped like a curtain. Kyle looked up and saw her enter the chamber, floating like judgment. He raised the rifle. She raised a hand, and the walls twisted. Gravity bent. Kyle slammed into the floor, then the ceiling. Blood trickled from his temple. He bit down, fought it. Crawled to the gun. The Queen advanced. Lex shouted in his ear. You've got one shot, Kyle. One. Don't wait for perfect. Just aim and believe she can die. He rolled to his side, steadied the rifle, and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck her mask. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then her body exploded in light, a soundless detonation that knocked Kyle unconscious and triggered a chain reaction across the ship. Raoul's charges went off. Kira shouted something triumphant over comms. Lex screamed for them to get out. Kyle woke up in the wreckage, carried by Kira and Raoul toward a glowing escape pod they had stolen mid-battle. As they launched into the sky, the Queen's ship imploded behind them, a black star folding into itself, taking her wrath with it. Earth watched the explosion from every screen, every rooftop, every bunker. There were no speeches. Just breathless silence. Then cheering. Kyle disappeared again after that. No interviews. No medals. Just gone. Some said he retired. Others said he died in that final blast, and the government was covering it up. But Lex got a letter 2 weeks later. No return address. Just one line. Tell the next ones to bring better armor. And somewhere, on a distant planet, in a different galaxy, another species reviewed footage of Earth's war. One commander paused the video just as Kyle pulled the trigger. He turned to his council and said, "Perhaps we look elsewhere." Earth had been underestimated once. Never again. Rain fell over the smoldering ruins of what had once been the Zarnak Queen's command ship, now nothing more than a charred scar in the Earth's crust. Rescue teams and scavengers moved through the wreckage with cautious awe, unsure if the thing was truly dead. The Queen's death had silenced the fleet, fractured their hierarchy, and sent half of their forces fleeing back into deep space. The rest, leaderless and confused, were being picked off one by Earth's ragtag resistance teams. Humanity had won, but no one really knew what that meant yet. The war was over in shape, but not in spirit. Some people waited for the next wave. Others simply waited for someone to explain what came next. Lex stood at the edge of the crater, watching steam rise from molten metal and alien bone. Her hair was tied back in a mess of sweat and soot, and her jacket was stained with blood, some of it hers, most of it not. A technician handed her a report she didn't bother to read. Her eyes were locked on the twisted remains of what she knew had once been the Queen's core chamber. The spot where Kyle had made the final shot. They'd found traces of his blood there, a boot print, a broken scope. But no body. For weeks, Earth's leaders had insisted on declaring Kyle Mercer dead. Official statements were made. Memorial statues were commissioned. A holiday was announced. Operation Iron Silence would be taught in military schools for the next 1,000 years. But Lex didn't believe it. Not because she couldn't accept it, but because she knew him too well. Kyle Mercer didn't die in explosions. He disappeared. That was his way. She'd gotten his note days after the battle, hidden inside the remains of the escape pod they recovered miles away in a riverbank. It was short, written on the back of an old target sheet. Same handwriting. Same dark humor. Tell the next ones to bring better armor. The war had shifted Earth. Not just in the way cities looked or in the tech that now sat side by side with human machines, but in how people thought. Unity born from desperation had become a kind of religion. Nations stopped squabbling long enough to build a new global defense force, one that didn't rely on AI simulations or high-concept weapons, but on practical precision, old-school grit, and minds like Kyle's. Lex helped shape the doctrine. Kira trained the first batch of snipers. Raoul led the new sabotage unit and called them Team Chaos, which somehow stuck. They began cataloging what was left of the Zarnak. Pieces of their war machines, genetic blueprints, fragments of language. It was like trying to understand a god through broken glass. Some of it was beautiful. Some of it was horrifying. A lot of it was incomprehensible. But in the wreckage, one message became clear: Earth hadn't just survived. It had drawn blood. The galaxy had been watching, and now, they would remember. One day, weeks later, Lex received a private transmission. No source. Encrypted in a way no human system could break, except hers. She cracked it with a tool she had designed from Kyle's old calculations. The screen flickered to life, revealing a distorted figure in shadow. They didn't give a name. They just spoke in calm, clear English. You think this is the end. It's not. You've opened a door. The Zarnak were arrogant, yes. But others are not. Others are listening. You have awakened attention far beyond what you understand. You are not prey anymore. You are noticed. Then the screen went black. Lex didn't tell anyone. Not yet. She copied the file, erased every trace, and stored it in a device she wore around her neck. She stared at the message for hours, thinking. Not about fear, but about preparation. Earth had won once. Could it again? Would Kyle come back if it couldn't? Kira joined her that night on the rooftop of the new base they built in the husk of a Zarnak warship. She handed Lex a drink that smoked faintly, and they sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. Do you think he's alive? Kira asked finally. Lex didn't answer right away. He's not the kind of man you bury, she said. He's the kind you wait for. They drank. The stars blinked. Somewhere far from Earth, in a quiet part of space, a small ship floated in darkness. No signal. No name. Inside, one man sat cross-legged on the floor, cleaning a rifle by hand. The chamber gleamed. The scope was scratched. A photo was taped inside the case, an old team photo, crumpled, burned at the edges, but whole. The man looked older, rougher, one arm clearly rebuilt with alien tech and wrapped in bandages. He moved slowly, but with purpose. When he finished, he looked out a window at a distant system pulsing red. He didn't smile. But something in his eyes said he was ready. Back on Earth, Lex stood before a new class of recruits. Most were young. A few were still kids, too shaken by the war to even stand straight. She didn't care. She didn't need warriors. She needed minds that could endure, adapt, think like Kyle. She tapped the board behind her and said, Lesson 1. The most dangerous weapon Earth has ever created isn't nuclear. It isn't chemical. It's a man with a scope, a grudge, and enough patience to wait for the perfect moment. The room was silent. She walked to the edge of the stage, eyes scanning every face. Lesson 2. Aliens don't fear armies. They don't fear missiles. They fear stories. And the story of Kyle Mercer? It's still being written. You are all part of the next chapter. Make it something worth reading. Outside, in a rebuilt square once leveled by alien fire, a statue stood tall. Not of a politician or general, but of a sniper crouched with his rifle. No name on the plaque. Just 3 words. Wait. Breathe. Fire. Earth would never forget. And somewhere in the cold reaches of space, neither would its enemies.